Okay, welcome everyone. So sorry for the wait. We were having some technical difficulties, but I think we figured it out. So I still am gonna just give it a minute for all the attendees to get in, but then we can go ahead and get started. And Matt, can I just get confirmation that you can see the screen that I'm sharing?
Yes, I can see the screen.
Okay.
And can you hear me okay? I'm not sure if
I
my
can hear you just
video
fine.
is on or not.
Your video is on, at least that I can see.
Okay.
It looks like we have a fair amount of folks. As people are trickling in, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat where you're tuning in from. That's very Winooski, that's where we are.
And I am tuning in from the great county of Addison County. Anyone else out there from Addison County?
For Jen's, I think. Great. Well, it looks like we have a good mix of folks here. Given that we were joining a few minutes late, I think we should go ahead and get started. So just want to thank everyone so much for joining us this evening for the first Weatherization Wednesday webinar of the Button Up Vermont campaign. My name is Bekah Kuster. I'm a community engagement manager with Efficiency Vermont and joined by my colleague, Matt Sharpe. We might have another colleague join, having some technical difficulties, but Bruce might join us as well. Before I turn it over to Matt to kick us off, I'm gonna just run through a few logistics and a few intro slides, but we can go ahead and get started. So just want to note that we are recording tonight's webinar. The recording will be sent to all registrants after the webinar, and then it'll also be available on Efficiency Vermont's YouTube page afterwards as well. So I want to make sure we also introduce who Efficiency Vermont is. So we are the statewide energy efficiency utility. So we help to reduce the cost of energy for all Vermonters and really help folks understand and make better use of energy and reduce greenhouse gases. And we do this in a lot of ways, including education, which is why we're all here tonight for this webinar. We also help to sponsor and facilitate the Button Up Vermont campaign, which kicked off October 1st. This is Vermont's annual campaign to help Vermonters prepare for winter, and it's really supported by a statewide collaboration of so many different partners, including utilities, community action agencies, town energy committees, just local citizens. So many folks make this campaign possible. So if you're interested in learning more about Button Up Vermont and the future webinars we have, you can check out all the resources at this website here, buttonupvermont.org. And I'll stop and just say, hi, Bruce, we started. Glad you could join. I'll kick it over to you in just a few moments. I'm just going over a few of the intro slides, but glad you can make it on. Also wanted to announce that we are going to do a gift card raffle. So one lucky attendee from tonight's webinar will be randomly drawn to win a $50 gift card to a local hardware store, hopefully to help you get started with your weatherization project in your home today. We'll do that drawing after the webinar, but if you are that lucky winner, then you will get an email from us shortly. So getting right into the content of what we're going to be learning today, Bruce is going to kick us off by talking about what weatherization is, what does it really mean, and why is it important? What are the benefits to your home? Then Matt's going to take it from there, talking about really how to get started with weatherization, from taking advantage of an energy assessment to connecting directly with a contractor, and then importantly, how you can actually pay for your project. So talking about rebates and incentives and financing options that are available to help bring down that cost. And then we'll have time for questions and discussion at the end. I'll ask that as your questions come up, please feel free to put them directly in the chat. We're going to have some of my colleagues in the back end who will be trying to answer those questions along the way, so we can, again, get to as many as possible. We also got a fair amount of questions that came in through registration, so we'll try to address those first and then address any of the remaining questions that are in the chat. If you are joining here on Facebook Live, you can put your questions in the comments there and get to those. I do also just want to note that we know that a lot of folks probably joining have very specific questions about their home, which is great, but it's sometimes challenging to answer those types of questions in this forum. So really highly recommend that if you have very specific questions about your home and weatherization, to follow up with us. Both Matt and I are going to share a few of the ways that you can kind of connect directly, more one-on-one with someone like Bruce or Matt to really get your questions answered about your home. So try to refrain from putting those in the chat here, but of course, there's definitely resources for you to follow up to have more in-depth conversations. So with that, Bruce, if you're ready, I'm gonna turn it over to you. Not sure we can hear you, Bruce. I think you're still muted. I'm gonna see if I can get you to unmute. Nothing right now. I'm wondering if we should pivot. Matt, would you mind
Yeah, I
taking
can.
over these slides?
Yeah, we can get started, and if Bruce can join, that's great. We can both be on and walk through the slides and get going on this. If you want to move to the next slide, we can roll.
Sounds good. Yep.
So a lot about weatherization that that we talk to customers about is making sure you're considering both the insulation that in this diagram is your sweater and also the air sealing, which is your windbreaker. If you put the two together, you have a really effective thermal envelope, and that's going to lead to comfort and savings. And you can't emphasize enough how important air sealing is. Just like if you were to wear a sweater out on a windy day, the wind blows through it and it's not very effective. And so having that air barrier, whether it be a layer of sheetrock or it's sealing gaps that might be present around your baseboard or your window trim, that air sealing is just really critical to a good weatherization job. If I go to the next slide, it's also important to remember that the comfort and savings comes in the summertime as well. And with these really warm summers we've been having, air sealing and insulation can keep the heat out as well. And so that can go a long ways to either reducing your air conditioning needs or just being comfortable without air conditioning. So keep in mind that that summer savings is present as well.
Can you guys hear me now?
Hi, Bruce. Yes, we can.
Hey, man. Hey.
Good troubleshooting.
My bad. I'm sorry. Yes.
No worries.
So, Matt, I could jump in if you're doing a wonderful job, by the way, but I can jump in here if you'd like. So we are, so how air moves through buildings. Whenever you pressurize something, whenever you heat something, you pressurize it. A hot air balloon, a plastic jug of milk sits on the counter in the sun, heats up, the cap will pop off it. So if you think about your house in the dead of winter when it's 10 below outside and the thermostat's at 65 inside, the upper part of your house is under a mild pressure trying to push the air out of the building. And so we're always trying to minimize those air leakages. All buildings leak to some degree, and all of these programs sort of take on the air leakage as a really important part. Some of those places where it leaks would be into the attic spaces through attic hatches, pull down stairs, ceiling mounted or surface mounted ceiling fixtures, recessed cans, chimney chases, doors, windows, and down in the bottom of the house, certainly around the foundation, bulkhead doors. So all of those places are really important places that we try to do the air sealing and minimize the amount of air that's traveling through the building.
And I think a nice piece on that last slide, you see the really cold blue arrows on the, coming in down low in your house. And that's why you feel the drafts down low. And that's also why pipes freeze. Is if you have an uninsulated basement sill area, that's where the really cold air gets sucked into the house as this stack effect is pushing air out the top.
Exactly. So I think we could go to the next slide. So certainly there are many benefits to doing buttoning up your house and weatherization. Certainly one is saving money. And typically could be hundreds of dollars worth of savings each year in energy bills. And the projects that we do typically can have savings up to 10 or 12 or 15% on their energy bills. The other part is we're also saving energy. 25% of the energy that we use in the state of Vermont goes to houses and businesses. And of that, more than 75% of the houses are using fossil fuels. So all of these help to reduce the use of the fossil fuels. The other piece is on over 30% of the greenhouse gas that we generate in the state of Vermont is for heating buildings. And of that, and that's second only to transportation. So there's a lot of good opportunity for greenhouse gas reduction through these programs as well. And we could go to the next slide. So things to consider is by understanding how the energy moves through these buildings, we can prioritize how we do weatherization. And we would certainly recommend using weatherization trained contractors. They're experienced, they have the testing equipment, they have the equipment and the knowledge to put in the insulating the air sealing that has to happen. So that would certainly be the first place to sort of think about starting. And usually what they do is typically work from the top down. Oftentimes in existing buildings, we're getting into attics and basements because oftentimes they're still unfinished and we can get access to them. Not so often do you actually tear the whole building apart and get into the the exterior walls of the building. So a lot of good energy work happens at the top and the bottom of the building. So normally they start at the top, trying to reduce the amount of air sealing that happens up there. And then they typically get to the basement, to those other places that are still accessible. And then oftentimes the end is sort of getting to the middle of the building where they have finished areas. And so that's sort of the sequence of how they would attack a project like this. We could go to the next slide. So here is a prime example of the kind of work that needs to be done. On the left-hand side, we have a lot of different things going on here. First of all, we have exposed soil. Soil is inherently, there's a lot of moisture in exposed soil. And people sometimes say, hey, I have a really dry basement. And we sort of say, hey, if you put a piece of plastic down there and go back in a week later and you lift up the piece of plastic, you're going to find some condensation on the backside of that plastic. So one of the things that always happens is we try to cover up any exposed soil. The other piece that's happening here is this is a crawl space, pretty common in the older housing stock throughout Vermont. And it's an uninsulated crawl space foundation wall. They put some mortar and stuff around some of the seams, but it certainly isn't air sealed. And then at the top, you can see the attempt to air seal the seam between the foundation piece and the wooden part of the floor system. And it's known as the rim joist, and it's inherently leaky. And it's typically buildings lose energy in two ways. Through conduction, it moves through a solid, or through convection, the movement of air. And the sweater is about conductive, and the jacket is about air sealing, the movement of air. So that rim joist is inherently notorious energy loser in both ways, because oftentimes it's not well insulated and it's very leaky. So one of the remedies here is they came in. If you look at the bottom of that image on the right, you can see a vapor barrier. It's a 6 mil or 10 mil poly, which gets wrapped up the side of the foundation wall. And then they come in with closed cell spray foam, and they spray foam that whole assembly. And they spray foam from the top of that assembly wall, air sealing against the wood. They come all the way down and they wrap that on top of the vapor barrier. So now this sort of part of the building behaves totally different. It's drier, it's warmer, the floors are less drafty, and all of these projects get a CAD inspection when they're done. So we could Matt, you might want to chime in here. This is a familiar project of yours, I think.
Yeah, and the cat's wondering where all the mice went. And so that's another advantage of a weatherization project like this is you do lock out the things that you really don't want in your house, whether that's moisture, radon, or pests. The weatherization can have a lot of benefits beyond energy that will help your indoor air quality and your comfort.
Yeah. When you slow down the amount of air that's going through these buildings, the air will be cleaner. It will be easier to heat. The indoor air quality will be better as well. So we could go to the next slide. And so here's an example of what may be happening at the top of the building. And this is the typical attic hatch. And so what you're seeing here is sort of two things going on. One is they're creating a dam around that opening so that they can add some more insulation and it doesn't come cascading down into the closet below. And on the third image to the right, they're creating the attic hatch. If you notice that black line that goes around the perimeter, that's a gasket. And the idea here is we want to attach the insulation to the attic hatch lid. Oftentimes in fiberglass applications, the last person out of there puts a little piece of fiberglass on that and squirrels down into the closet. By the time the electrician gets up there 2 or 3 times, oftentimes that piece of fiberglass is sort of blown off to the side, and now you have no insulation at all. Ideally, you want to be insulating that attic hatch to the same level as the flat attic. And so this is a really nice illustration about how they would upgrade an attic hatch. Matt, got any additional comments?
All good.
Okay, how about the next slide? So here is another part that happens up in the attic. And what you're looking at on the left-hand side down, it says top plate. This is an interior partition wall. And oftentimes the way that they build buildings is they build the interior partition walls first, and then they set the framing for the roof on top of that. And so then they go and insulate the flat attic, and they never get to the top of those plates. And those interior partition walls are typically hollow, and there's no attempt to make any air sealing in there. So when we talk about the building being under pressure, because it's warmer inside than it is outside, that mild pressure pushes the air into that hollow cavity. There's plenty of penetrations in that cavity in light switches and plugs and door casings and baseboard. And so the air gets in there and it gets pushed up through there and it wiggles between the top of the plate and the interior surface of the drywall or the finish in those bedrooms. And then it has the ability to wiggle up between those two, the spruce and the gypsum board, and get up into the flat attic. It's not uncommon if you know you're above an interior partition wall in a flat attic and there's fiberglass in that bay, you lift up the fiberglass insulation where it intersects the top of the plate, and you often see a black line of dust from that air that's been pushed through that gap over the years. Those two materials move differently. One's made out of gypsum, the other one's made out of spruce. So under heat and moisture, they expand differently and air travels up through there. So one of the things that whenever they do one of these projects, these insulating contractors go up into a flat attic and they say, is it good? Is it bad? Or is it ugly, right? And if it's ugly, they tear it all out and they redo it. But if it's bad, they sort of say, hey, there's some value here. We can move this out of the way. And it allows them to get to these air sealings from above the ceiling. So they're caulking and sealing these penetrations, either these wall plates or surface mounted light fixtures, or any of the penetrations that are coming through that assembly between the heated part of the building downstairs and the unheated part of the building and the attic space. So that's what they're trying to show here. And over on the right-hand side, they're sealing the penetration of that wire going through there. So Matt, would you like to chime in here, or are we moving to the next slide?
The only thing I can say is just whatever you do, don't just blow over what you got without going up there and looking to see what kind of air sealing you can do.
Yeah. You know, we do a lot of these virtual home energy visits, and sometimes I talk to people, and when we get to the attic, they say, oh yeah, me and my uncle, we just put in 15 inches of cellulose insulation up in the attic last week. And these are virtual, so I can sort of see the building. And so if I see a light fixture or an attic hatch above the person that I'm talking to, I sort of think, now, should I ask them if they did the air sealing before they blew in all that insulation? Because it can be a real nightmare to try to move after they blow in the additional 12 or 16 inches of cellulose on top of that ceiling plane. It is a really tough chore to move it out of the way and then do the air sealing. So the air sealing always wants to happen first. I think we're ready for the next slide. So health and safety, right? So health and safety, occupant safety trumps energy efficiency, right? Do no harm. And these are the sort of things that we need to be concerned with. Certainly whenever you tighten up a building, humans make moisture, plants make moisture, cooking makes moisture. So if you tighten up a building, you have to be really conscious about how you're going to manage that moisture. So during these weatherization projects, you can air seal places and then you can control the moisture. You can do the ventilation where you need it and not necessarily just have other sources of moist air traveling through the building. The weatherization can help to address that. Certainly asbestos removal is an important piece, whether we're talking about old steam systems that might have asbestos insulating pipes in basements. Sometimes we have a product called vermiculite that's in the ag space, and there can be asbestos in vermiculite. Sometimes There's structural damage that has to be addressed before we can move forward with weatherization projects. And now it's become much more relevant is this whole idea of the resilience of the flooding aspects. And it's an important piece that, I think people are really starting to, well, it's just a new avenue that we really have to think about is, what is the possibility? I mean, I have an appointment Friday morning in Hardwick to go back to a person's house who flooded in 2023 and turned around and flooded, last month or the month before. And so we really have to think about, what the future may bring, because historically we used these spaces, basements, to put a lot of mechanical places in. That was sort of like, hey, we can put it down in the basement. It's a good place for it to go. And now we're really starting to rethink that in a lot of situations. So I think unless Matt has more to say about this.
Well, I think the thing I'd say is that it's, we do have some programs and definitely some services available for folks who have been impacted by the flood. So reach out. We can provide technical support to your situation, because these kinds of situations tend to need a little bit more thought. I mean, just like all buildings are different, but flooded buildings and how you're going to deal with a sort of being resilient against a future flood can be fairly complicated in which materials you use. So it's a good reason to give us a ring.
Great. Next slide, please. So indoor air quality. Good weatherization will really help indoor air quality. You will be able to minimize the amount of air that's being dragged through your house, right? And oftentimes we don't know where those under these circumstances where houses get heated and they get pressurized and they're pulling outside air through the bottom of the building and exhausting warm air through the top of the building. Lots of times we don't know where that air is coming from. That cat that was down in the crawl space that was chasing the mice, he could have that may, and this is no offense to you, Matt, because you know the building better than I, but cats have litter boxes. And so it's not uncommon. I mean, we don't really know where a lot of this air is coming from in leaky houses. So when we get into them and we identify this stuff, we minimize the amount of sort of tainted air that can be dragged through houses. We see this a lot with attached garages, where you have combustion appliances in garages, mowers and gas and different volatile organic compounds. And so that's another example where when you do weatherization, you really have the ability to improve the air quality in your house. The air will be cleaner, it will be warmer. And I guess that's just a really big part of, sometimes people don't necessarily think about that, is that, they just think about how much less money am I going to spend, but it's also a lot about indoor air quality. People spend like 90% of their lives in buildings. And so this has become a more important thing. And there's all kinds of equipment that you can use to monitor indoor air quality. So it's an important thing as when it comes to weatherization. Indoor air quality is really something that will benefit from the weatherization. I think we're ready for the next slide. Now I think it's Matt's turn.
Just where I'm going to take over, Bruce?
Yes, please do, Matt. Thanks for sort of pinch hitting there.
Sure thing, yeah. And feel free to chime in as we get through these too. So I think we can get to the next slide. We'll talk about getting started. So there are lots of energy professionals in this state that can help you move forward. Some of those energy professionals are at Efficiency Vermont, and you can sign up for a free virtual home energy visit, or you can call us and talk to us about your situation. Some of those professionals are at VGS. So if you're a VGS customer, reach out to that company and see what the offers they have that might meet your needs. And some of those experts are contractors, and specifically contractors that are partnering with Efficiency Vermont and the Efficiency Excellence Network of contractors. And these contractors, they would charge a fee normally for their services, but there is a tax credit, a federal tax credit, that you may be able to claim in your income tax return to at least get some of that reimbursed. The point is, get started in some manner, and people are here to help. And in some cases, it's just a call away to sign up for a virtual home energy visit with us. to find a contractor, if you're ready to do some work and you have a pretty good sense of what you want to do and you want to take advantage of the rebates and financing options we're going to talk about in a minute, go ahead and get linked up with a contractor, one that is in the Efficiency Excellence Network. You can go to the Find a Pro site on our website, or sometimes it's easier to go to the rebate page and click Find a Contractor right from the rebate page that is on our website. And you'll enter your zip code and get a list of contractors sorted in proximity to your zip code. So paying for your project. This is not cheap work. It's very valuable work, and it does come with an expense. And we're going to talk about some programs that you may be eligible for. And when we talk about income-based eligibility, there are two categories of eligibility. It's low income and moderate income. And different programs are serving the low income threshold households, and some programs are serving anything below moderate income. And so this chart is on our website that you can go see. And I've highlighted two examples just to walk through how this works. And keep in mind, this is gross income of the entire household. And if you look at the example number one, we're at Addison County. Let's say you're a family of two. And if you go through the household of two column and run down until you cross the moderate income highlighted lines, you see 104,650. So if your household of two makes less than that amount of gross income from all sources, then you're eligible for these moderate and low income rebate programs, which are really a higher level of support. And if you look at the example number two, for the low income household, let's see that same family of two, and you can see these are sorted in different counties. And so that same household of two in any other county besides the ones listed up above, that income threshold is 65,500. So if your household makes less than 65,500 and you're a household of two, now you're eligible for the low income rebates and lower. And part of the point of this slide is that there are a lot of people eligible as moderate income and below. And I talk to people all the time who think like, oh no, I'm probably not eligible for programs. I tried that once and it wasn't the case that I was eligible. Well, look again, because some of these income thresholds really make sort of what's referred to as the missing middle eligible for the higher services and rebates. So that's just to orient you on when we talk about income levels, that's the chart to refer to see where you fall in these categories. And related to that, there is a new home repair program that just launched October 1st for low and moderate income households. So if you're in that low and moderate income tier, then there's potentially up to $15,000 to help with repairs that are necessary to move forward with weatherization. And it's really important to hear that necessary for a weatherization project. We're not talking about just repairing windows or replacing windows or siding or roofing. It's really, is there something that needs to be done to the house so that you can weatherize the building? Some pretty easy examples are if you have vermiculite in your attic. Here's now a source of funding that can help remediate that vermiculite, so now you can properly insulate that attic. Another really clean example is that wet basement scenario. You have a wet basement, you need to have some drainage work done or some polyvapor barriers installed. Here's a really good program to help you address that wet basement problem so that you can insulate the building properly. So keep an eye out on that. If you have these kinds of home repairs that are hindering your ability to move forward with weatherization, this is a great program to look into. And the link is right there on the site. And there is a online application, but to apply for that you do need a quote from the home repair contractor and the quote from the weatherization contractor to be submitted with your application. So those would be the first things to do, would be to get those estimates from contractors. There is a weatherization program in Vermont that serves income eligible households that are in the low income tier. And these programs are free and they're provided to you from your community action agency. So if you're in that low income tier, look at the chart for where your county might be and give that agency a call to apply for that free assistance. There's nothing better than free. We have some programs that are rebates, but this program provides excellent weatherization at no cost to you. If you're not eligible or on the cusp of eligibility for that program, Efficiency Vermont does run what we call the Home Performance with Energy Star program. And this is comprehensive weatherization that you work with a private contractor that you would pay, and then you'd receive a rebate from us, depending on whether you're qualifying as moderate income or lower, 75% of the project cost up to a cap. So potentially up to $9,500 to do that weatherization project. And if you pair this with the home repair, let's say you have a wet basement and you have a $15,000 repair there, and now you can use that in combination with this program, and now you have close to $25,000 to fix your wet basement and weatherize it, as well as probably weatherize a few other areas in your house. So there's really unprecedented funding right now. It is, ARPA funded, so it's not a steady stream, and there is a point at which it'll expire, and if there's not more funding to come replace it, then the rebates would have to change at that point. But for now, we have a pretty good time frame to use this money, and I encourage everyone to take advantage of it. If you are a VGS customer on the pipeline, they have a different rebate structure. So if you're a VGS customer, you really want to reach out to them to see what you're eligible for. There's a snapshot here of their rebate levels. The whole process and the premise can be the same, where you're doing what Bruce talked about. You're air sealing the attics and re-insulating them. You're dealing with moisture in the basement and insulating and air sealing those areas. But the program funding and amounts are just a little different. And then there's also the do-it-yourself option. There's not a lot of rebate money for do-it-yourself work, but for things like, you're just air sealing a rim joist, or dealing with the attic hatch that Bruce showed a nice diagram of, and maybe weatherizing some windows. The do-it-yourself rebate, it's $100 cash back, pretty easy to access. And this could also be used for things like storm window inserts. So if any of you are considering the window dressers program or buying storm windows, this is a good rebate to help you improve your window situation. In this chart, just as kind of a suggestion as far as which projects we'd recommend you go pro with, and which projects might be better suited for a do-it-yourself effort. And so you can see doing things like weatherized windows or those window inserts, weather stripping doors, insulating pipes. There's some small stuff like attic hatches or rim joists you might be able to tackle. But when it gets to the big stuff like air sealing an attic, attics are really not very easy to work in places, and you really make sure you got to protect yourself, and it's hard to do good work under those conditions. And the pros have the equipment and the experience to do it really well. And because of the rebate programs we have, why would you put yourself through that when you can get 75% of the cost back in a rebate and have a pro do it really well? So that's the suggestion on like what level to get into yourself versus hiring out a pro. So there's also a financing program. So it is hard to come up with the upfront cash and then wait for a rebate to show up to pay off that debt, or to pay off that however you're gonna pay with a credit card or make up what you owe. The home energy loan is here to help you pay for the system with a 0% loan. So that's 0% for 5 years, and for the low and moderate income tiers. If you extend the loan out more than 5 years, you start to have some interest rate, or if you're a higher income earner, you have some interest to pay as well. But what this loan allows you to do is pay for the project up to $20,000. You pay for the project, and that buys you the time to get the rebate. And then you could either hold on to that rebate and use it for something else as a 0% loan, or you can just go ahead and pay off your loan and bring down your loan payment to more manageable monthly. Lots of different eligible projects here: the weatherization, the home repair, heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. And there are a few different credit unions that are participating. And you can see that on the screen, what's now called East Rise Credit Union Opportunities and NeighborWorks in Western Vermont.
The one thing I would just add about that is, because I talk to people a lot about this, is that it allows you to do oftentimes a more comprehensive project. I mean, if you think you can do the basement, I talk to people on a regular basis, and they're ready to do the insulating and the air sealing, and then we start talking about the mechanicals, and they sort of think, yeah, it would be nice to do a heat pump, but I'm all, I've used up all my gas on the weatherization. This allows you to do a more comprehensive project, because this goes out to 20K. So people sort of think twice about the fact, wow, if I can do the basement and bring a heat pump in here, or do a hybrid heat pump hot water heater in the mix, then it allows you to roll it all into one loan. So that's a nice benefit of this.
And it also, that makes me think, Bruce, this is a maximum of $20,000, but that's a $20,000 balance at any given time that you can maintain. So you could get a loan for $20,000. You could get your $15,000 in rebates back from that home repair project, bring that loan down to $5,000, and then borrow another $15,000 for the weatherization or the heat pumps or whatever else is next, and just keep on reaccessing the loan as long as you keep your balance below that $20,000 threshold.
Yeah.
There's another financing offer called WRAP, which stands for Weatherization Repayment Assistance Program. And this is basically on-bill financing. So working with the utilities, VHFA has created this program to allow you to pay for the products and improvements through WRAP and have the monthly charge be applied to your utility bill. So instead of a separate loan, you're paying that work back on your utility bill. There are some qualifications needed. You can include weatherization and heat pumps or heat pump water heaters, but the project does have to be assessed a little more diligently with a contractor to estimate energy savings and ensure that the cash flow is positive on an annual basis, so that your energy savings estimated is going to be more than your monthly payment. And that's the premise of the program. And with all the rebates that can be applied to the costs, it's pretty reasonable to be able to get that cash flow positive situation.
Guess this is me now, right?
I think so.
Okay.
I hope so.
I didn't realize how fast we got to the presentation.
Maybe talking
yes.
too fast. I don't know. Maybe questions can slow us down.
No, it's okay. I was just kind of in it. Anyway, so yeah, Bruce and Matt both shared a lot, which is great, but I definitely wanted to kind of give folks on the call some really easy next steps that you can take depending on kind of where you are in this process, and just kind of wrap it up for you. So what are some things you can do next following this webinar? Matt mentioned, just having a conversation with someone. Efficiency Vermont is here to be a resource for you. So you can always reach out to Efficiency Vermont. We have a great team of energy advisors that can kind of help you identify what you might be eligible for, what programs might be best for you, and just really customize what works best for your home. So definitely recommend as a first step, if you're still confused and have questions and really just want to talk one-on-one with someone, giving us a call is a great idea. We also mentioned that free virtual home energy visit. So those are visits. It's a virtual visit where you can talk to someone like Matt or Bruce. They will walk around your home and essentially help you identify where you're losing energy and where you could be making some improvement. So that's also a great next step. Again, VGS customers, Vermont Gas customers can request a home energy evaluation from them. And as Matt said, if you are ready to connect with a contractor or you're ready to do your weatherization project, the next step is connecting with a contractor. So definitely recommend you use that Find a Pro page on our website to connect with a local contractor to get started on your project. And then, of course, if you think you might be if you're income eligible and think you might qualify for the Weatherization Assistance Program, definitely recommend reaching out to your community action agency. Again, we'd rather you be able to take advantage of free weatherization. But if you don't qualify for that, then of course you can go through our programs as well. And last is I just wanted to note we have some upcoming Weatherization Wednesdays. So we are actually going to be hosting this session again October 23rd at noon. So if you know any folks who really wanted to be here but couldn't make it, let them know that we are hosting this again. And then we're going to be talking about heat pumps starting next week. So we know that, once you weatherize your home, heat pumps are a really fantastic way to not only keep it warm in the winter, but also cool in the summer. So if you're interested in heat pumps, we have 2 sessions, one next week at 6 p.m. and then again, October 30th at noon. So you can sign up for those webinars on the Button Up Vermont website. We also list different local community events that are happening across the state that town energy committees and other partners are hosting. So check those out as well. And with that, I think we can turn to questions. I can stop sharing my screen. I did mention that I was going to ask some questions that came in when folks were registering first, and then we'll get to any questions in the chat. So I'll leave definitely a few minutes for that. But we did get some questions specifically on Windows, and I thought we could just address that now. Some folks asked about that they need to replace Windows but really can't afford it. What are some options that they can consider to insulate or air seal around their windows?
Well, I think it's important to understand that windows, so back to conductive and convective, right? Glass is not a very good insulating material. It's rather mediocre. And so oftentimes that's why you don't see incentives in a lot of these programs. It's more cost effective to do attic or basement insulation than it is to replace windows. They're very expensive. So for the most part, but everybody always asks about windows. And, I sort of think, I guess it's because the windows are in your face, right? Every time you look, is someone coming up the driveway? What's the weather? You're always looking through the window. So when it fails, it's noticeable. So because they're so expensive, and if you need new windows, you'll come to that realization. But you can do certain things to existing windows. If you can slow down the amount of air that's traveling through the window, address the convective heat loss, then that is usually beneficial. So air sealing, caulking, sealing, new latches, replacing glass, reglazing, all of those will help slow down the amount of air that's traveling through the window. You can do exterior storm windows, which add another layer of air, which is not a bad insulator if you can keep it from blowing around. Or you can do an interior storm, like the window dresser units. You can do interior shades. The honeycomb shade is another pocket of air that is a buffer between, the warm side and the cold side of the glass. So all of those are certain ways that you can upgrade the performance of an existing window. But it's always a hard message to tell people that, there really aren't incentives. On the other hand, there is a federal tax incentive for windows, and I looked into it because I smashed a giant window and had to buy a new one. And they'll give you, I believe it's 30% of the cost of window, up to $600, but the window is of such high performance value that it is like the Cadillac triple pane. I mean, they rate windows in U value as opposed to R value, and one is the inverse of the other. So you can swap them back and forth. But that window that gets you a federal tax credit is an extremely high-end window. And so, and it just goes back to the point that, glass is not a good insulating piece of material to start with. And so that's oftentimes why it's a tough rub with window replacement. Matt, maybe you want to.
Yeah, just make them as tight as you can. I mean, if you already have 2 panes of glass from either the window itself or the window and a storm, your really best bang for the buck is weather stripping, maybe one of the storm window inserts, because those are pretty low cost, very cost effective units. But yeah, stop the air from moving through with weather stripping is the most cost effective option for windows.
We had a few questions around insulation material. So one person asked, can we blow cellulose insulation on top of existing fiberglass?
Yeah, it happens on a regular basis. Oftentimes that's one of the things about the fiberglass is very hard to get it around all the obstacles that are up in an attic. All the wires, all the framing, it comes in this rectangular bat. And so it's not uncommon at all. The most important part, once again, though, is before you blow in it, you have to sort of move or get at any of the places that need to be air sealed underneath that fiberglass and air seal them, because that's your opportunity. And so it's not uncommon to top off cellulose on top of fiberglass because it fills in around a lot of the nooks and crannies that the fiberglass doesn't fit into. And then it creates this nice even blanket and settles into place. Now the fiberglass has to be of value, right? If it's compressed or chewed up, or then you could very well be putting, well, any additional insulation is going to be beneficial, but it's not uncommon to use cellulose over top of existing fiberglass if it's done correctly.
Yeah, but you really do have to make sure you get those air seals done. And the diagrams Bruce showed earlier is a very clean situation. You have top plates that are very distinct and observable from the drywall, in a diagram. In a real house, especially if there's lath and plaster, you're going to look down and you're just going to see lath and plaster. You're not going to know where your walls are necessarily. And those ceilings, those can really benefit from a more comprehensive air sealing by just pulling everything out and putting kind of a skim coat of foam on before you blow the cellulose. That's where you're going to get really great results by doing something like that. If you already have drywall, then you can work with drywall a little easier to make that airtight.
Okay, I think we just have a few more questions that were submitted, but then I think we should definitely turn to the live chat. One question we got in was, what would be your recommended prioritization based on effectiveness? And I think they're just talking about like, where would you prioritize weatherizing? That's what I'm assuming. But you can interpret that however you want.
What are your pain points? Do you have ice dams that might lead to thinking that the attic should be taken care of, or do you have a really cold, musty basement that might lead to the basement being the first priority? But those 2 points usually, one of the two is usually the first place to look for making some improvements.
Okay, I'm going to turn to the chat. I think there's been a lot of answers, but let me just see if there's anything. And also, Matt or Bruce, if you see a question that you just want to answer, go for it. But I'll see if I can see anything. We did get a few questions about if mobile homes qualify. I don't know if either of you.
Mobile homes qualify, certainly if you're eligible for the weatherization the weatherization assistance program, enroll with them and try to get the free weatherization. Mobile homes do qualify for the program. It's just a lot harder. It's hard enough to find a contractor as it is, and it's just a lot harder to find contractors that work on mobile homes. They're not easy to improve, and the place normally to look for improvements there is in the bottom part of the house. That's where you have most access to that crawl space underneath the belly, and that might be what you focus on. But yeah, it's tough. It's really tough to get a contractor into a mobile home project.
We have a question asked, will air sealing and insulation top and bottom help with sound reduction from outside noise?
Yeah, most likely. Different insulation products have different abilities to dampen sound. So the foam products don't really do very good at stopping sound, but they do really, really well at making things airtight. And sound travels through air leakage as well. And so, stopping the air is of primary importance. Again, that's kind of a repeated theme here. And then the fluffy insulation does a lot better at mitigating sound.
Great. Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but that makes a lot of sense. Let's see what else we have. One question I just see in here, it was related to VGS, but just, I think this is a good question generally that people have. They reach out to contractors and they don't get a response. What's a recommendation? I know that we generally say, contractors are really busy. We recommend that you call, multiple times or have to call multiple contractors, but curious if Bruce or Matt, you have any other thing to add there as far as, the difficulty of reaching a contractor sometimes to do this work.
Don't wait. Just try. And I know it is hard. Everyone's busy, especially this time of year. And I'd say don't forget about what you want to do when it comes summertime or springtime. A lot of times we get to spring and we're like, all right, we're through the winter. I guess we can wait till next fall. Well, don't. It's got to be a long-term planning effort. And, contractors that participate in our program can also serve you within VGS territory. You're just going to be getting the VGS incentive levels, but you can still use our program contractors and process for that.
The other point that I would say is if you do in fact get a hold of somebody and they say, hey, listen, we can give you a flight in February, take it, right? Just get on the list because things change. Situations change. And if it's not a big project and they know, hey, we can fly into that place for a couple days and we have to keep a crew going, it's not uncommon at all to be, and you can continue to call other contractors, right? I mean, you really have to be persistent, but, don't be afraid to say yes to somebody and take a future appointment. And, because oftentimes they may actually get you in sooner. So,
and I liken it to the grocery store, checkout line, right? Like, oh man, I don't want to wait in that line over there. I'll go to this one. And then it ends up being a longer wait after all, so yeah, get in line, be patient. Is the best advice we could give.
It's a good analogy. All right, we have 2 more minutes. I think I can ask 1 or 2 more questions and then we'll wrap up. Going back to the mobile home question, Katie asked, can you seal the underneath of a mobile home or does it still need ventilation?
If you seal the mobile home skirting, you're not going to want to ventilate it because you're then going to lose your insulated value. And a lot of times in the summer, if think about ventilating it seasonally, the summer air tends to be really humid. And so you don't really want to ventilate when the outdoor air is super humid. There are some vents that are like humidistat controlled so that if the humidity conditions outside are good for venting, it'll open up. That kind of thing might be good. But in general, an enclosed crawl space that is kept warm and kept sort of conditioned by the air within the building that you're trying to heat is usually a better outcome for a crawl space.
Great. I did see some questions in the chat specifically around heat pumps and things like that. I definitely recommend if you have those questions to join the session on heat pumps next week or the one on the 30th, so we can answer those in depth. But I think we're almost at time and I don't know if we have any more time. So I'm just gonna say thanks everyone so much for joining us. Again, we'll be sending out the recording to all of you. Matt or Bruce have any final words? Other than that, we'll go ahead and close it out.
Nope, button up. Now's the time to do
yeah.
it. The programs are available for you now, and they may not be all available for you in the future. So I would say if you're even thinking about it, get started.
Yes,
Great.
and
Well,
thanks for your
thanks,
patience.
everyone.
Thanks for your patience on the front end of this. Sorry about the technical
It
delays.
happens. It's webinar. So yes, thanks everyone for being patient. Really appreciate it. All right. Take care, everyone.